Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Last Palabra podcast, my weekly attempt at capturing and dumping the flow of information in and out of my head for you all to listen to. This is of course the difficult second episode where we'll talk about things rattling around my head, like growing up, things that worry me like Brexit and climate change, and the things that make me smile, such as how I got to the top of my work's fantasy football league despite knowing nothing about football. Firstly, thanks for listening. Since my exploration into podcasting, delving into why I wanted to record a podcast, and taking the leap into doing so, I've been pretty busy working on it. The podcast is now what I'd say fully fledged, as it's listed on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn and Pocket Casts, as well as on YouTube. And you can also follow and interact with me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. I also received some nice comments from family and friends who listen, so thank you all for that. And here we are, the difficult follow-up episode. I've been working on episode 1 for some 29, almost 30 years, and I prepared episode 2 in just the space of a week. Either way, it's better to continue onward, keep creating, than to be too thoughtful about it all and start doubting and putting it off. In order to get started, I thought what better way than to consider some of the best follow-up books, films and albums that I could think of. So I'm going to jump right in with an album that defined mine and likely many others' teenage years, Nevermind by Nirvana. Whilst many people know this album, few are aware of Nirvana's debut album. Released in 1989, Bleach was one of the more raw and noisy albums, blatantly missing the talented Dave Grohl on the drums, and the album's much more bleak and a difficult listen than the shimmering guitars and the thoughtful songwriting found on Nevermind. Whilst I was a fan of Bleach, it just doesn't compare to Nevermind, with the second album having such hits as Come As You Are, Lithium, In Bloom, and of course the hit that made the band famous, Smells Like Teen Spirit. The story goes that the late great Kurt Cobain was growing weary of the noisy Seattle grunge sound and was influenced by the likes of R.E.M. and the Pixies, and his music became more melodic. In fact, I remember watching a VHS 1 interview when I was sort of 14, 15 with bassist Chris Novoselic, who talked about the straight 4/4 bass line in Smells Like Teen Spirit, you know, that kind of like dum 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 dum. It's really, really straight. There's no flow, there's no kind of jazziness about it. And basically they said that they stole it from the Pixies. They just completely lifted it from the Pixies. And Kurt is saying that he, basically this quote is saying that he just ripped off the Pixies completely. He wanted to mix the kind of the soft and the hard sounds and write the ultimate pop song. Speaking of the Pixies, one of my all-time favourite albums, Doolittle, by the Pixies, is in fact a difficult second album. The 1989 album Doolittle, undoubtedly introduced to me by my Uncle Ian, is the follow-up to Surfer Rosa, and is undoubtedly better, just in every way. Arguably their biggest hits, Monkey Gone to Heaven and Here Comes Your Man, are on that album, as well as Debaser, which is one of my all-time favourite songs, along with Wave of Mutilation and Hey, which are amazing songs in their own right, and they show the real depth of the Pixies' songwriting. If you don't know the album, go and look it up, Doolittle by the Pixies. I'll tweet some of their songs maybe this week. They're just so good, really, really worth a listen. Another more famous album, which completely outshone the debut record, is Oasis' What's the Story Morning Glory. Now, I'm a fan of Definitely Maybe. It's a great album. But I mean, What's the Story Morning Glory is just an album full of Britpop bangers. From track 1, Hello, to track 12, Champagne Supernova. It's just 50 minutes and 6 seconds of pure musical gold. Go to any pub in Britain and I challenge you, start singing a track off this album and you can guarantee somebody will sing along. It's loved by young and old, men and women, and it doesn't seem to be disappearing anytime soon. That's not to say though that Oasis' debut album Definitely Maybe, which celebrated 25 years just this week on the 29th of August, is an amazing album in its own right, featuring Rock and Roll Star, Live Forever, Cigarettes and Alcohol, and the beautiful Half a World Away. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not better, but it's certainly a hell of a follow-up album. In terms of difficult second novels, I'm struggling to find some that are really notable that I've read and can talk about. This is maybe more of a downfall on my part, but there are just so many good books and people keep writing more and more, it's hard to keep up. Well, catch up, let alone keep up. I did, however, discover that Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 is in fact a second novel, and worthy of a mention. Although it, barely a novel, does it class as a novel? It's quite thin. I only read it this year, and it's a short little book, and I actually thought I'd accidentally bought an abridged version. That's how short it is. It's about a dystopian, or maybe utopian, depending on how you see it, future where books are banned in favour of room-sized TVs and drugs. The protagonist, Montag, is a fireman, but in Bradbury's future, firemen don't put out fires, they start them to burn books. Too much learning and critical thinking is forbidden, but Montag, much to the disgust of his wife, is slowly subverted. I don't want to give any more away, but I really enjoyed the book, although it deeply shook me. As I reflect on my own time, spending more and more hours staring into a screen and less hours reading from the words put on paper by the greatest minds in history. If you're a fan of George Orwell's 1984 or Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, or even if you're just interested in subverting the government and mainstream media, maybe you need to give Fahrenheit 451 a read. I'd recommend it. In terms of films, there are some obvious standouts, but I want to start with Kevin Smith's Mallrats as an amazing follow-up movie. I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith, especially his kind of earlier work, like Clerks, Mallrats, Jay and Silent Bob. He made his feature-length debut of Clerks, which is a truly incredible film. Go and watch it. He shot it at the convenience store and video store that he actually worked at. He got his friends to act in it, and he had a budget of just $27,000 that he got from maxing out various credit cards and selling off his comic book collection. It's a true labour of love that was shot 21 days straight on black and white film just because it was cheaper, and is mostly just conversations between characters with kind of little in terms of action. The coolest trivia, I think, around Clerks is that it all had to be shot at night when the shop was closed, his boss gave him permission to use the shop. And so they wrote into the script, and you'll see it in the film, that the shop shutters are permanently down because someone jams gum into the locks. It's a great film. Give it a watch. It grossed around $3 million in the cinema, and made kind of Kevin Smith famous, and cemented his place as a filmmaker. And just a year later, he came back with his follow-up with a budget of $6.1 million. Apparently he didn't know what to do with it all, and so they were bringing in cranes, and they kind of scripted in loads of special effects and stuff just to really spend the budget and play with it. And he made Mallrats. It fell flat in the cinemas, but has since developed kind of a cult following. Obviously, it's way before kind of my time. I was just a kid, but I really fell in love with it, with the dialogue and the kind of the grungy music of the whole thing. Cast members include Jason Lee and a very young Ben Affleck, as well as Ethan Suplee. Despite its failings, Mallrats is one of my favourite of the early Kevin Smith movies, just because of its whimsical, kind of fun, 90s alternative soundtrack, and it just captures the kind of slacker culture at the time. Kevin Smith is possibly best known for like the stoner Jay and Silent Bob movie, which apparently he's working on a sequel to, as well as the Seth Rogen, Elizabeth Banks comedy Zack and Miri Make a Porno. Lesser known, and I didn't realise this until I was kind of doing a bit of research for this, he was a co-executive producer on Good Will Hunting, and was also the voice of Stormtrooper on J.J. Abrams' Star Wars The Force Awakens. He's also currently, and this is really exciting, I'm really looking forward to this, he's working on Masters of the Universe He-Man series for Netflix, which is just going to be great. Go check out Kevin Smith and his films. He's got an amazing podcast as well, especially if you like look up his early films, because they're really kind of angsty. They've got this slacker culture vibe. They've got really witty dialogue. Dogma's probably got to be a firm favourite, starring Ben Affleck again, Matt Damon as well, Adam Rickman, Salma Hayek, and Chris Rock, to name just a few of the famous faces that appear in that film. Chasing Amy is also a must-watch if you get into the whole Kevin Smith groove. Other follow-up films I thought of, but are not necessarily difficult second movies for the writer or director, but seconds in a franchise. For a few dollars more, the follow-up to Sergio Leone's spaghetti western, starring Clint Eastwood, A Fistful of Dollars, the one that comes before The Good, and Bad, and the Ugly. Really good sequel. I much preferred it to the first one. The soundtrack's better. The kind of the intenseness. They leave a lot of pauses because it was just cheaper to not record dialogue. But that's just perfect because it's filled with Ennio Morricone's beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. The Empire Strikes Back, easily a sequel that lives up to the first one, if not overcomes it. A really solid Star Wars film. And The Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan Batman series, easily better than Batman Begins. Probably better than Dark Knight Rises, let's be honest. Easily better than Dark Knight Rises as well. Very infamous film. A true masterpiece of cinema of the modern age, in my opinion. A lot of people didn't like it. Fight me. I don't. It's an amazing film. Arguably, probably one of the strongest sequels of all time, except maybe for Terminator 2. Controversial. So, we're all growing up. Last weekend, I went to a 30th birthday party, and it was clear that we're all moving into another age. It was a lunchtime party on a Sunday with parents and grandparents, and even toddlers were there. It's far removed from what I remember of 20th birthday parties. Actually, it was the first 30th birthday party of sort of my friends, as the school years work differently in Spain to in England. In England, the school year runs from September to the following August. So that meant I was born in October. I'm one of the older people in my academic year, because everyone that sort of turned, 4, 5 in September starts school, up to the people that turn 4 or 5 at the end of August the following year. So I went to school with a lot of people that were born in 1989 and 1990. They were in my academic year, if you like. So, whereas in Spain, people that are born in 1989 are all in the same school year, if that makes sense. So I'm one of the older ones. I'm one of the first to turn 30 out of my kind of group of friends, as a lot of them were born in 1990, whereas I was born in 1989, but we're all in the same school year. However, the Spanish system follows the calendar year. So all of the children that were born in 1989 were all in the same school year. So whilst I'm one of the oldest in my school year, I'd be one of the youngest if I'd have gone to school in Spain. So we begin the 30th birthday party era, if you like, with kind of Patry's circle of friends, as a lot of them are older than her. She was born in December. And you kind of get these typical conversations of people that don't really want to turn 30 and not really want to kind of grow up, because like turning 30 is a big deal. You become an adult. While I'm reluctant to grow up too much, and actually I've been given 3 Batman t-shirts in the last month. I don't know if that reflects me not growing up or reflects me being kind of a geek. I don't know. But I've got no issues with turning 30. The 4th decade, for me, marks something special. It's kind of like I'm old enough to be independent and experienced enough not to fuck it up too badly, I hope. And people start to look at you as kind of a proper adult. I work with a lot of kind of people that are under the age of maybe 25, 26. And like they're talking to me like, you're turning 30. Like you know stuff now. You know shit. You know, like you've seen shit. Certainly in a kind of a work and career sense, I think it marks something like it's a, you stop being this kind of post-university age and you move into this kind of new age where you're taken like more seriously. However, they do say that it's only 30. 30 is the new 20 apparently. So I'm not at all worried about it. Of course, with turning 30, there are kind of some societal pressures that hit. Having a proper job, settling down, getting married, buying a house, having a kid. Certainly our mums are kind of asking about that last one. But we are ticking off boxes already. As much as I don't want to grow up, there's kind of some cool stuff that we're moving forward with. A month ago, almost to the day, in fact, the 3rd of August, Patry and I tied the knot. And honestly, that was the best decision, and a completely logical one. Like, yeah, it's about love, it's about emotion. But honestly, if you find someone that's just a true ally in this world, loves you dearly, wants the best for you, wants the best for a shared future, why wouldn't you marry that person? Why wouldn't you want to spend as much time as possible with that person and commit to a future together? We spent nearly 2 years saving for the wedding, with a lot of help from both of our parents. We were able to pay for an amazing day, amazing wedding in Barcelona with all of our family and friends. All of the cliches, however, are completely true. Everything flew by very, very quickly. We barely ate anything. I feel like I didn't see anybody. And this was extra frustrating for me because a lot of my family had made a real effort. They'd, not given up their summer holidays, but they made sure their summer holidays coincided with being in Barcelona on the 3rd of August. They were forced to spend it there with us. They flew to Barcelona, they found hotels. They did everything so that they could be there. I'm very grateful to them. I'm sure they were happy to do it, but I feel like I barely spent 5 seconds with them. One of the most important things all along for me was to find a really good photographer and videographer. Obviously, I'm really big into photos and video, so it was important to find someone who was good, but also to capture the memories. I thought that, this was really important because aside from kind of what you take away with you, what will last with you in your memory forever, it's all you're left with, really. And looking back at the video and photos from my parents' wedding 31 years ago, there are people that are no longer with us. And it's great to see them on such a happy occasion, surrounded by family and friends. And also, of course, for me, I wasn't able to attend that wedding, my parents' wedding, because I wasn't even born. And so the photos and the video there are important for me to put a context to that moment in my parents' lives. The photos, our photographer actually gave us the photos just a few days ago, and they're great. They're really good. There's loads of them. There's about 950 of them, and she's given them as in colour and black and white. So we're talking like, I don't know, some 1800, 1900 photos. They combine various friends and family from both sides. Some of the combinations of groups is really interesting. There's like someone that Patry went to university with some of my friends from work. It's like, how are we having photos together? It's really weird. There's a lot of posed photos of Patry and I, where the photographer kind of whisked us away after the ceremony to these gardens at the venue to do like a photo shoot, which, we had to pose for. Can you stand here, do this, hold hands, kiss, look over there, look over here. It's lovely. The pictures have come out amazing. I'm very happy with them. But I really prefer the ones that we're posing with our friends, or the kind of candid ones. They make me much happier, and like they really, really capture the joy that I remember of that day. And also, she's captured some moments that I don't even remember. There's some hilarious ones of us dancing and friends and I posing and doing daft things. And that's captured really well. So for me, on balance, probably less kind of photo shoot, more just capturing the kind of the ambience, if you like. Then we did what's called a post-wedding photo shoot. And honestly, I didn't know that this, like, the whole concept even existed. But the idea is that you put back on all your wedding clothes. So I put on my suit, my tie, Patry put on the big white wedding dress. And you go somewhere and pose for yet more photos. People do all kinds of things, including like jumping in the sea in their suit and wedding dress. Just making it fun and not having to worry too much. We opted to go for a walk around our neighbourhood, and it just so happens that the Sagrada Familia is in our neighbourhood. So we had lots of photos of us walking around outside the Sagrada Familia in our wedding clobber. I have to admit, we got a lot of looks, and a lot of people took pictures of us. God knows where they'll end up. We must be all over Instagram stories from people that visit Sagrada Familia on that day. But a lot of people were really, really happy about it. They congratulated us. There was one lady that even came over and like helped kind of arrange and straighten up the wedding dress whilst the photographer was preparing to take the photos. It was kind of weird and uncomfortable, but I'm really excited to see how these photos turn out. Once we'd had a wander around, we went to Five Guys, still in our wedding clothes. If you don't know Five Guys, it's kind of like an upscale McDonald's, a bit more expensive, but much better quality. And it's got like a 1950s American diner kind of feel to it. We'd given them a heads up that this is, we were going to go there dressed like this with a photographer and everything. And they were really great. They had someone meet us. They were so accommodating. They took care of us. And they even treated us to dinner. Again, it was a really bizarre experience, but just so much fun. And we're really excited to see how these photos turn out. It'll just be yet another bizarre memory in our wedding year. Whilst that, for the most part, brings kind of the wedding festivities to a close, we have got our honeymoon in December and the video to look forward to, which apparently he's hoping to get to us this side of Christmas. So, like, we're kind of wrapping up this wedding stuff, but it's still ongoing for a little while yet. And then just to add to the grown-upness of everything, we are buying a flat. We've made an offer on a flat just outside of Barcelona, in a town where Patry's family lives, and it's really convenient for us in terms of work and everything as well. The high and the low of it is, we've just gotten really tired of renting, answering to landlords, not being in control of our lives. Whilst being hundreds of thousands of euros in debt to a bank is hardly taking control of our lives, I do think it's a step in the right direction. And at least gives a place that we can call our own and that we're truly responsible for. Again, it's another big step into adulthood. We're all growing up. Whilst the flat situation is still in the early stages, I'm sure I'll keep you updated as we progress. Whilst not 100%, we have started packing our first box. Getting married, whilst demonstrating Patry and my undying love for each other, it could prove useful as well as Brexit rolls around the corner, looming over us like a storm cloud over a swimming pool on a sunny day. The prospect of a no-deal Brexit became a real possibility last week as Prime Minister Boris Johnson requested that the Queen approve proroguing of Parliament for 5 weeks, up until mid-October, when there'll be very little time to deliberate a deal by the October 31st deadline. It seems that the Tories, between the various Brexit negotiators, the two Prime Ministers we've had since June 23rd, 2016, they've just run down the clock intentionally to leave without a deal. And now, at the final sprint, if you like, the final hurdle, the final months that we have to try and just secure a little bit of something for the Brits living in Europe, for the Europeans living in Britain, for some kind of trade agreement so that we don't crash out, that food scarcity, medicine scarcity, like this is the last chance saloon. unelected Prime Minister, and I'm going to say he's unelected because he was elected as an MP, but he was never elected as Prime Minister. The elections, Theresa May was the party leader. His party, who, let's be honest, they're only in power themselves thanks to a very dubious DUP deal. The level of democracy here is very thin. They're looking to close down Parliament altogether because he's afraid that even his own ministers in his own party are going to turn against him and block a no-deal Brexit. Now, as I've been repeatedly told by Brexit supporters on Twitter, the government are very well able to prorogue Parliament. It's a normal thing that would happen. They draft a new budget, they usher in a new term, and Johnson's entitled to do so, of course, taking over the leadership. It is, however, rather unprecedented that they should take a full 5 weeks to do so. And of course, proroguing until October 14th barely leaves time for the Queen's speech, the budget, before the Brexit deadline, so the deal just won't be discussed. It's very, very intentional, let's be fucking honest. Nobody's stupid, even though he thinks that we are. There do seem to be few solutions. There are some, but there are few out of this Brexit shit show at this time. Parliament is set to read a Standing Order 24, which basically says it's high urgency. We need to talk about it. To talk about forming a deal, not crashing out with a deal. This would have to be debated. Obviously, probably amended, reread, voted in favour by at least half the Commons. And then if the MPs do pass the bill at the earliest on Wednesday, let's say, it could reach the House of Lords by Thursday, where it'll be deliberated and voted on. But of course, if it takes them more than a day, they don't meet on Friday, because why would they? And so if they don't reach a decision on Thursday, and the one day that they'd have, it would spill over to next week, meaning we're losing more time. At earliest, then, it would maybe like Monday, it'd become formal law. This time, I'll be recording episode 3 of the podcast. It draws a fine line because as of a week on Thursday, 9th of September, it looks like they could just suspend Parliament altogether, not to come back until October 14th. Barring that, Boris Johnson could call a snap election if enough MPs support Standing Order 24, which we'll know at the earliest on Thursday. So, I don't know, he's threatened to expel Tory MPs if they don't back him. If not enough back him, there's clearly not a mandate in Parliament to do anything, so he should call an election. But we could be looking at mid-October, by which time the clock will be run down anyway. So we really need some kind of, a situation where we can move things forward and have, Boris Johnson remain in the Premier Ministership, remain as Prime Minister, to try and figure out a solution before the 31st of October Brexit Day, where we leave the Union with or without a deal. Honestly, the subverting of British parliamentary democracy is horrifying. I think the British parliamentary democracy project has run its course. I think it's not useful anymore. I think it served its purpose, and it doesn't fit a modern age. But to see it undermined like this, it's awful. It's disgraceful. It's a real House of Cards play, and it sees this truly vile man. Let's be honest, Boris Johnson. He did this act as a clown for a long time when he was Mayor of London, and now he's just some kind of supervillain, the bumbling supervillain that deep down is kind of a little bit too switched on and a little bit too evil. And we've got him running the country into the ground, and we have to ask, to what end? I don't think we've even scratched the surface as to why these people have been so desperate for Brexit, let alone without a deal. It's been repeatedly proven what a disaster it's going to be for the British economy, British society, and how unlawful the Brexit referendum campaigning was. So what's it all for? There are rumours that it's all about the European Union Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive that came into play at the start of this year, which aims to stop EU companies declaring their profits in lower tax countries overseas and instead makes them pay EU rates regardless where they are. As they should. Taxes are important. They pay for our healthcare, they pay for our education, they pay for our welfare services, among other things. And if this turns out to be true, and that the rich ruling elite of Britain have forced Brexit upon the country in order to avoid paying their fucking taxes, well, I think we should reconsider the gulag. I don't know. To add further stress to the situation, especially for the European expats living in Britain. Let's call them expats, not migrants, because I'm an expat, apparently. Maybe I'm a migrant. Maybe I'm a British migrant in Spain. I don't know. But it turns out that, or it seems that Home Secretary Priti Patel is just an outright xenophobe. I don't know. Um, but she's just doing everything she can to stop freedom of movement into the UK for EU citizens. And uh, the issue is that whatever Britain does, it looks like the EU are going to reciprocate for British citizens. Meaning that someone like me could potentially, if they stop freedom of movement, I could get permission to live and work in Spain. But it would mean I'd have to apply for a visa to cross the border into France or Portugal legally. Which, at the minute, the freedom of movement in Europe is amazing, especially for the people I work with who travel around Europe, commentating, working on MotoGP. A lot of them are based in Spain, but they can go to Italy, they can go to Czech Republic, they can go to France, they can go, all over without needing a visa. What's more, Patel intends to increase the £30,000 income threshold, making it harder for European workers who pay tax and social security in the UK to attain this so-called settled status. Again, a lot points at the EU countries reciprocating the conditions for British citizens. So what she imposes on UK citizens with her left hand, she also imposes on British citizens in Europe with her right hand. And what makes this worse is that the average UK salary of £28,600 falls massively short of the threshold she's proposing. I think she's a real vile piece of work, and she just sums up the xenophobia and the racism in the British cabinet right now. And I think this is added to by the fact that she's the daughter of a migrant family. They've made their home in what was a once compassionate, welcoming arms of Great Britain. You'd expect her to have more empathy and understanding with people that are trying to do the same, bring families to Great Britain for the better of their families, make their home here, and give back to Britain as well. Let's not forget that in 2017, she held unofficial meetings in Israel with officials that eventually led her resignation. She is just awful, really horrible, like Johnson, undermines everything that British democracy should be. Other distressing world news last week came in the form of the Amazon forest burning. We got this incredible, I don't know if it was drone, helicopter, space, satellite footage of just these massive, massive fires all across Brazil and South America. Whilst this story seems to have sort of suddenly disappeared and disappeared almost as quickly, it's really important that we keep the story alive, because we've got to fight more and more, pushing back against these dire effects of capitalism and that it's having on the planet. It seems that Brazil has had a lot of forest fires this year, in fact the highest number since 2010, according to the National Institute for Space Research. The fires can occur naturally during the dry seasons, and it's been one of the hotter years on record, so perhaps it's not surprising that the fires are starting. However, there are reports that Brazilian President Bolsonaro has encouraged rainforest clearing for farming and logging, and if that's the case, it just makes me want to weep for our world, The high and the low of it is that this is just bad news for everyone involved. Not only is the burning of trees and land emitting a ton of carbon into the atmosphere, but we rely on those trees to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. In fact, a study last year suggested that planting 1 trillion trees, and that's in addition to the ones that have been burned this year, because the study was done last year, 1 trillion trees could reduce the problem massively. It could in fact reverse global warming. But the problem is that it takes years for these trees to mature. We could even be looking at upwards of 50 years for it to have a real effect. That's if we plant and protect 1 trillion trees without burning and destroying any more. So we need to stop planting trees, stop burning them down. It's suggested that this is something that any one of us could do. We could go out and plant a tree. There's this kind of like guerrilla tree planting idea going on. But also making land available to trees, We also need to look at why deforestation happens. And a large amount of it points to farming, particularly meat farming, as the farmers use the fertile soil to grow grass, the space for grazing animals. Not to mention that meat farming itself creates large amounts of carbon dioxide anyway. And these animals take time to mature, are transported, processed, packaged, and plastic. They're packaged in plastic before being transported more to our supermarkets. Like, the whole process just seems backwards to me. and the UN did say in August that global meat consumption has to fall in order to combat global warming. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has suggested that the benefits are twofold, because it frees up land, as we mentioned, where we can plant more trees, and it would cut gigatons of carbon dioxide being emitted into the atmosphere by the process of cultivating meat. They didn't say to go totally meat-free, as they don't recommend diets. They didn't want to kind of get their hands wet in all of that, but the message was pretty damn clear. Now, I believe this is an easy win, because if every single one of us went meat-free just like 2-3 days a week, 25% of our meals, 30% of our meals, or, you know, the equivalent of 6 to 10 meals over a week, we could have a huge impact. One of the things that I repeatedly struggle to get my head around is just how small of an impact we have on our own individually. But that impact quickly becomes more dramatic when more of us get involved, and that's for positive and negative. So the negative is one of us drives a car, it's not going to have a massive impact. But if millions of us drive cars, that's going to have a pretty dire effect on the environment. But the inverse is true. If one of us avoids driving our cars, okay, it's having an effect, but not a massive one. But if millions of us can avoid driving our cars, if millions of us can avoid eating meat a couple of days a week, that could have an effect. And it's not as scary as it sounds. I love bacon. I love steak. Believe me, like, if there's anyone that's going to be pulled away, I'd probably be one of the last. But I've actually found it quite exciting looking at recipes, trying different foods. I'm not going to swap meat for meat substitutes. I don't want to kind of go with this faux bacon and like imitation meats. I'm just going to balance out my meat cravings on the meat, on the meat days, if you like, the days I'm going to eat meat. And the other days I'll make sure I have meat-free meals. It's that easy, just trying to keep a balance. Apparently, the easiest way to do it is just think of grain, green, and bean. And I can't remember where I saw this, but I've seen it lots as I've been researching this. And if you go for grain, green, and bean, you get a really balanced, healthy meal, high in nutrients and proteins. And yes, that is proteins without meat. Apparently, the combination of beans and grain gives you like all the amino acids you need. I don't know. But it's as simple as that. So tonight I'll be getting my grain from whole wheat tortilla wraps, my green from spinach and roasted vegetables, and my bean from, beans as well as some homemade hummus. And boom, healthy dinner and saving the planet. 2 for 1. Try it. And maybe it'll do you good, getting more vegetables in as well. Just start by switching out, every other dinner with like a vegetarian option, and just go from there. Now, I want to tell you about something that's made me smile this past week. I have to admit, I've had some fun with my work colleagues, because I work in sort of sports media, and a lot of my work colleagues are really big into sports, all kinds of sports, but particularly like the most popular sport, which is football. My English colleagues obviously big into Premier League. They've got their teams over there. So at the start of the month, the start of August, we decided to set up the Work Fantasy Football League, and I thought, I'll get involved. Why not? Give it a go. It'll be fun. It'll be a talking point. Maybe it encourages me to keep tabs on football too, which is something that always served well when I go to social events. Like a lot of people, when they say, where are you from? I'm from England. Where you? I'm from Nottingham, but I grew up in Leicester actually. Leicester City. And suddenly, oh yeah, they won the league a few years ago, right? Okay, you follow football. Manchester City, Chelsea. Did you see so and so did this? I don't know. Useful. Follow the football if you want to be able to talk to anyone. Like, that's my advice. It rarely steers me wrong between football and movies and music. I don't know. It's easy. So I signed up, and I set about picking my team, mostly going by like crowd wisdom. Thank you, Twitter. And just names that I recognized, like they've been in the news or I've heard people talking about them. And I looked as well for tips from various websites. Like, seriously, just Google Premier League fantasy football tips. They're there. There's a ton of them. So I was going like Mo Salah from Liverpool, Sterling, Manchester City, Maguire because he played for Leicester City, my team, as I said, and he was sold to Manchester United over the summer for like a load of money. It was a massive transfer. I can't remember. So I was like, let's start with them. Peter Schmeichel. No, Peter Schmeichel's son, Schmeichel from Leicester City. Peter Schmeichel was the Manchester United goalkeeper. Schmeichel Jr. I don't know his first name. Should look that up. He's in goal, of course. Leicester City fan. Didn't get Jamie Vardy up front. I spent all my cash on Mo Salah and Sterling, and it didn't happen. Maybe I'll try and transfer him in this week. I don't know. And then I got lucky with like Tammy Abraham, the Chelsea player, who I'd never even heard of. Saw him on Twitter, people saying, yeah, maybe worth a go. And it turned out to be something of a star purchase. He's given me a massive, massive points boost. And by the end of game week 3, I was second in the World League standings. Wow. And it was embarrassing for everybody else. I'm not going to complain. But it was kind of like, okay, I've been lucky up to now. I need to take this a bit seriously. Still going to go with crowd wisdom. Like, you can't go wrong, I think, with crowd wisdom. But I've been a little bit more on it. I've been trawling Twitter for tips. I've been looking for the upcoming fixtures, like Manchester United play Leicester City this week. In my very not informed guess, I would say Manchester United get the upper hand there. Maybe I should try and trade out some Leicester City players. Manchester United have got some easy fixtures coming up. Let's try and bring some more of them in. Just crude guesses about who's going to beat whom in the coming weeks. But I have started looking like 3 or 4 weeks ahead. I'm not going to lie, the pressure's on a little bit. I'm trying not to get all big-headed about it, but there is a certain smugness about being the top of a fantasy league of people that are massive football fans when I have literally no clue. We're only 4 weeks in, though, so let's not get carried away. But it is difficult just to not be smug and big-headed when I'm beating a load of true football fans. Little victories in life. And speaking of little victories, Rugby Union. Ireland beat Wales on Saturday in the pre-World Cup friendlies, and England beat Ireland a week previous. So Wales went from number 1 in the world standings down to 4th. Ireland went up to 2nd in the world, and England went up to 3rd without even getting their boots muddy. And New Zealand returned to the top as well, number 1 ranked team in the world, and they didn't even have to do a hacker. It's bizarre. Next week, if Ireland beat Wales, they'll be going to the World Cup as number 1 team in the world, and if Wales beat Ireland by 16 points, I think, they'll be going as number 1. In short, the world ranking system is bizarre and messed up and shouldn't really apply to friendlies ahead of the World Cup games. But hey-ho, we're just a few weeks away from the Rugby World Cup kicking off on September 20th. I can't wait. The quarterfinals actually coincide with the Japanese MotoGP. So many other dates also coincide with these kind of weird MotoGP rounds that we've got coming up, like Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, where I'm going to be sleeping and working weird hours. So there's a good chance that I'm going to be able to get to watch quite a lot of the rugby action live. Well, live on TV. Very excited about it. All I need to do now, though, is find a bar in Barcelona, open at those hours, that I can go and watch the rugby. That's all for this week. I feel like I've rattled through it this week. I don't know. But thank you all once again for joining me. Again, do get in contact. Come and find me on Instagram or Twitter, where I'm at The Last Palabra, or on Facebook as well. I'm really keen to hear any and all feedback, comments, anything that we've spoken about today, or, if you've got any fantasy football tips. Thanks for listening.